I'll call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee this day, February 4th, 2020. I'm Councilmember Reich. I chair the committee and am joined by my colleagues, Councilmembers Johnson, Palmisano, Bender, Fletcher, and Gordon. We're a full complement and we'll proceed with today's agenda, of which we have 6 printed items, and we'll have an additional walk-on resolution. I will go through the consent items, if that is okay with the committee, and go through the resolution prior to the public hearings, given the importance of that resolution and some of the statements therein. The first item on consent is the contract amendment with Global Specialty Contractors Incorporated for PV Plaza Construction Project. 4 is the contract amendment with Swanson and Youngdale Incorporated for cleaning, coating, and thickener tanks at the dewatering plant. 5 is the joint powers agreement with the City of Columbia Heights for the 37th Avenue Northeast street resurfacing project. And 6 is the bid for the Hennepin Avenue downtown roadway streetscape reconstruction project. I'll move all items. Is there any discussion on the consent? See none. All in favor of the consent items as listed, say aye. Aye. Dissenting, nay. That carries. And before us, we have a resolution that recognizes a very important date on the calendar, which is recognizing the Transit Equity Day. I will read our resolution, and we can make comment after that as a committee. Recognizing Transit Equity Day, February 4th, 2020 is the 3rd annual Transit Equity Day. And whereas Transit Equity Day is celebrated on February 4th because it marks the 107th birthday of Rosa Parks, and whereas Rosa Parks helped lead a movement to oppose injustice in the Montgomery bus system, and whereas work continues today to ensure that public transportation is accessible and affordable to all, and whereas Transit Equity Day calls attention to disparities in transit access and air quality, and whereas Transit Equity Day in Minneapolis is hosted by Labor Network for Sustainability and Sierra Club North Star Chapter. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council do hereby recognize February 4th, 2020 as Transit Equity Day in the City of Minneapolis. I'll take a motion to approve, and then we can discuss the matter, and then there's be some subsequent actions that the committee will take up in future meetings that we can comment on as well.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the resolution as stated, say aye. Aye. Dissenting, nay. Any comments from committee? I will just say that the implications of these broad statements do have direct implication in projects both contemplated, soon to be implemented, and soon to be designed. And we want to make sure that this lens is before us and all those actions and all those contemplations. I know folks have been working on the very groups that have sponsored this on very specific projects throughout our community. I see the council president has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really just wanted to speak, really echoing what you have said. I think our new transportation action plan, which will be coming out in draft form, in a couple of months or so, will help really articulate our city's vision for transit equity and transportation equity generally in a new way. Of course, seeking comment from community about ways we might be able to even strengthen what will be in that draft. We've taken a strong position as a city on a couple of important projects recently, and are fighting for funding for projects like the D-Line Bus Rapid Transit project. It's one of our very highest priorities on our legislative agenda. We are engaging with the 25294 conversation, really making sure that in North Minneapolis, the mistakes of the past in freeway expansion through communities are not repeated, and really strongly advocating for transit there. So I think there'll be things coming very soon, both generally on how we are building equitable systems across our city, how we're advocating for equitable systems across our region, and then positions on individual projects as well. So thanks for bringing this forward, letting us take the chance to pause and remember why we're doing all of this work and those details, and appreciate so much the folks who came today and contacted us about Transit Equity Day and the need for us as a city to continue to put transportation equity at the front and center of our work here in this committee.
Well put. Councilmember Gordon.
I appreciate this. I guess I was expecting something a little bit different based on some of the communications that I got recently from some groups who seem very concerned about what's happening with I-94 and the lack of planning that a dedicated bus lane, or at least an HOV lane of some kind, like we're doing on 35, isn't going in there. And I think when we start looking at freeway reconstructions, we really have some opportunities to really make a big difference. I'm actually very appreciative of the council for supporting the comp plan policy that actually talks about kind of recovering from the damage that was done to us as a city by the freeway system. And actually, if you look at where the freeways were built, they cut through and tore out housing in some of the poorest, most diverse areas of our city, and this includes 94. Up through North Minneapolis, that basically severed the community from the river and did long-lasting harm to our city in general. So I hope we can be thinking about that history and how we can repair and heal from some of that damage as we're moving forward. I, of course, and make no effort to hide my desire to put some lids on some of those freeways and reconnect some of those neighborhoods. But I also think we should look at it when we're actually building on them. If we really are serious about climate change as well as equity, we need to make sure that mass transit is a piece of those projects going forward.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Reich, and happy Transit Equity Day, everybody. This is very important. I was just at a meeting at the Bottineau neighborhood where we were actually receiving data from the MPCA and the Department of Health. They were asking questions about some polluting businesses along the river and trying to understand what was contributing to the air quality in their neighborhood. And one of the answers that they got was that it was actually very tough to give an answer on that because it was very hard to disaggregate the pollution from 94 with the pollution from some of the industrial polluters. And so recognizing that we have we've clearly identified an issue, that we have higher rates of asthma, we have higher rates of other health problems related to air quality. We have a real urgent need to invest in solutions that are going to reduce vehicle miles traveled, that are going to reduce the impact of cars on our city, and especially on areas that have been previously neglected, in areas of concentrated poverty, and in areas of segregation. So I'm excited to celebrate this today and know that even if we're not passing the resolution that Councilmember Gordon referenced today, there's certainly a commitment on this council to continue taking this up and to continue reducing vehicle miles traveled and making sure that we're not inducing more traffic into neighborhoods that are already experiencing the negative effects of vehicle traffic through their neighborhoods.
Thank you for those comments, and obviously it resonates very deeply with me. We share those boundaries, and it definitely is an exacerbating of factor that is undeniable and needs to be addressed with certain urgency. The additional language that would be specific, this is a general broad compass for how we want to act and prioritize. Those specific work is ongoing. We want to make sure that we nail it down correctly, and every document that we forward, every statement we make should be contextualized with the overall comprehensive goals and priorities to make sure that a standalone statement has a companion of statements and actions that will have the ultimate impact for all our communities in the city moving forward. And we're very committed to that work, and I know staff is very committed to that work as well. I don't know if Director Hutchinson wanted to make any closing comments as we see this strong statement here, how that looks moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak to this. I believe this is a really important recognition that we tie together both equity and climate and see transit as a solution that solves for both long-standing issues that we see in our community. My staff, my team has been working very hard, very closely with teams at both MnDOT and really all of our partners to be forthright about the city's position on no addition of lanes and no freeway expansion. You will see that in all of our work, whether it's the Transportation Action Plan, which will set very lofty goals for mode shift, or our assistance with any resolution that the council would like to take up. So strong statements can be anticipated from Public Works, and we're very happy to support you, the council, and the community in recognizing Transit Equity Day.
Thank you. Well, I think we all look forward to that work. And again, thank the people who are here today who highlighted this. I think it's important because it not only clarifies, but it gives direction. But I think more importantly, it's motivating. And I deeply appreciate that partnership in the community. And I think my colleagues spoke very well in terms of our intentions moving forward. So with that, we have this resolution. It's been approved. I really appreciate the discussion by the committee, and we wouldn't have had it if it wasn't brought forward by the people who are here today from the advocacy world and the communities themselves. So with that, we can now move to public hearing number 1, which is the 4th Street Resurfacing Project Approval and Assessment. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mike Kennedy, Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair, will present on both public hearings. I will introduce him once and allow him to do both presentations, the first of which is the 4th Street Southeast Street Resurfacing Project Approval and Assessment.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, Mike Kennedy. I'm the Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair for Public Works. We're here following the designation on December 13th of the 2020 Street Resurfacing Program to talk about 2 projects within that program. The first one that we'll talk about is called the 4th Street Southeast Street Resurfacing Project. It is made up of 2 segments. The first is 4th Street Southeast from Malcolm Avenue to Bedford, and then Bedford Street Southeast from 4th Street to University Avenue, as shown on the diagram on your monitor there. These streets were reconstructed in 1979, and they have a PCI range of 46 to 49. The proposed street resurfacing special assessments were determined by applying the 2020 uniform assessment rates to the land area of benefited parcels located within the street influence zone along those improved streets. These assessments were not calculated based on project cost alone. The city uses a formula that combines influence area with an annually established universal assessment rate. The formula is carefully considered and applied by city staff and is intended to account for and reflect for the project's value to benefited properties. The 2020 rates are 66 cents per square foot for non-residential properties and 22 cents per square foot for residential. The proposed total assessment amount for the 4th Street resurfacing project is $143,387.81. There was a pre-public hearing meeting held on Thursday, January 29th. There were no attendees at that meeting. It's a fairly small project. So our recommendation today is passage of a resolution ordering the work to proceed and adopting special assessments in the amount of that was mentioned before for the 4th Street project, and passage of a resolution requesting Board of Assessment and Taxation to authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in the amount of $143,385 for the project. That's my presentation. I can stand ready, and we have other folks here from Public Works that can answer questions if needed.
Thank you. Any questions per the staff presentation? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Anyone signed in? No one signed in. Anyone wish to come forward and make comment? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and move item 1 as described in the presentation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries, and we can now go to item 2 as presented by Director Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the second project we'll be talking about today from the 2020 resurfacing program. This is the Dorman South Residential Street Resurfacing Project, as you can see on the map here, which is in this same program. Dorman South is bounded, as you can see, and the streets included in the project are on the map that's shown. The streets are local city streets, commonly called residential city streets for the most part, and were reconstructed in 1980 and have a current pavement condition index of 48. Upon completion, Public Works will reinstall any pedestrian safety measures that currently exist in the project area. Again, the proposed street resurfacing special assessments were determined by applying the 2020 uniform assessments rate to the land area of benefited properties and parcels located within the street influence zone and the improved streets. The same rates as mentioned earlier, 66 cents per square foot and 22 cents per square foot were used in the calculations. The proposed total assessment amount for the Dorman South Residential Street Resurfacing Project is $745,423.47. Again, there was a pre-public hearing community meeting held on Thursday, January 30th. There were 21 attendees at this. This is a fairly much larger project. We did have a lot of interest, and therefore our recommendation today is passage of resolution ordering the work to proceed and adopting special assessments in the amount of that have been mentioned before for this project, and passage of a resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation authorize the city's issuance and sale of assessment bonds in the amount of $745,420 for this project. Again, we're here to answer any other questions if needed.
Any questions for staff? Councilmember Gordon?
I had one question about this because it's fairly unique, or at least some of the properties are fairly unique. I think most of us live on a street and we have a part of a street in front of us, and then we have an alley behind us. Right here along some sections of Dorman, the homes are located on West River Parkway. So when that was resurfaced, everyone was assessed for that. But because of the size of the lots or the way the city was developed, then the back, they also have a street, which is Dorman, and so they're assessed again. In my history here, I don't think we've ever made accommodations for that, but I'm just wondering, do we account for that when we're doing our uniform assessments? Because in a sense, we're thinking when we pay to get the street in front of our house fixed, other people are paying to get it in front of theirs, and we're all sharing that benefit. But now we have a couple people maybe who feel like they might be getting, I don't know, hit twice. So maybe you could just talk about that a little bit before we hear from folks. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, yes, I'd be happy to talk about that, and I think many of you are aware that there have been some letters of objection filed by folks along the West River Parkway with those exact questions, and I think we can answer all those letters with at one time here. I put on the overhead a map, graphic showing the assessment areas based upon the uniform assessment rate process that we use for the entire project. If you look along here, the West River Road, West River Parkway is here, and then Dorman Avenue is here. Most of the properties, I do have a unique situation that most of the properties along that stretch do abut both the West River Parkway and Dorman. And the properties exist all the way across that. And so you don't have that typical situation that we have where we calculate the influence area of a typical block with an alley between the streets. When and as you can see on the drawing there, the influence area only covers half of those properties. So they were not assessed based upon the entire parcel size, but upon the amount of area that was within the influence area for this project for Dorman Street. The same thing happened when they were assessed for the West River Parkway project. They were only assessed a certain portion of their property. It happened that we used the same resurfacing rate. Back then it was 21 cents a square foot. Now it's 22 cents a square foot. So it's virtually identical. But the idea is they didn't get double assessed or double taxed. They did get kind of a stacked tax or assessment because it happened within, a few years. So they're going to see those assessments on their property taxes unless they paid them off. But yes, they were assessed 2 times, but only for the appropriate area of the influence area for each individual project.
I appreciate that. Some of the lots look particularly large, but I think it's useful for us to get this information from you now before the hearing.
Sure.
And so we all kind of understand where we're at. Thank you.
Councilmember Fletcher?
I'll just note that this is consistent with how we've done this in other places, and if we are going to open this can of worms and start making accommodations, I have some building owners between Hennepin and Nicollet who would like to have a conversation, and I don't think that we want to open that.
Noted. Any further questions for the staff for the presentation? See none, I will then open the public hearing. I do have people signed in. I will go through that list. Anyone else can sign in subsequently for the public hearing. So at the top of the list, we have Joshua Hodek. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Joshua Hodak. I live at 2820 37th Avenue South in this resurfacing area. I wanted to use this if I could. I moved to the area in October of 2015. So, 2005. So I've been there about 15 years. Neighbors have been talking about the intersection of 38th Avenue South and 28th Street East, which is at the entrance to Brackett Park. It's all now also an entrance to the Midtown Greenway. A few years ago, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board redid what is now a multi-use path entrance from the park to this intersection, this three-way stop sign controlled intersection. But the neighbors have been asking for improvements and to this intersection daily in the summer when there's league play on the ball fields. It gets all parked up all the way up to the stop signs. Public Works has been great about improving the stop signs and putting the do not park up to 30 feet. And finally, last year, they put bollard protected curb bump outs, temporary ones, here and here. This schematic was put together by neighbors. There's been 2 documented crashes there between pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. Sightlines are a problem, and then also compliance with the stop signs. We're asking, the Longfellow Community Council has weighed in. I can share all this with you. This is back in 2016. Here are emails dating back to 2011, which I'll share with you. And at National Night Outs, over the years, I have over 40 signatures of neighbors asking for improvements. The ask here is simply to make those bump outs curbs because the threat is not going away, despite the argument that we don't know the exact alignment of the 38th Street Greenway, which I don't know if you can see that. You can. But this is your map. This is the city of Minneapolis and Minneapolis Public Schools, what do they call it? Walking routes for youth. And so I'll supply this with you, but it is here's that intersection, that red dot. It's also on the public schools map for children trying to get to the various schools in the area. So the ask here is spend a few cents on permanent curbs at that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'll take all commentary, and then staff can respond to the collection of comments through the public hearing process. So moving down that line, Lee Beatty, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Lee Beatty, and I had no idea that I would be speaking here today. But I live on at 2801 42nd Avenue South, which is epicenter for the storm drain project that is ongoing. In fact, that has been happening for a year and 2 months. I live 15 feet from the diesel engines that are powering what needs to happen below the street. I'm not here to complain about that because I understand the need for it, and I have a very good working relationship with the people who are on the project, the people who are working 100 feet underground, the whole system. It's lasted this long because, of course, they can't access it when either the river is high or there's a lot of melt and runoff, which has to come all the way from Hiawatha and 94 all the way down past my house 100 feet down. So I really appreciate the work that these people are doing, and we have a very, very good relationship. It has, however, taken a year and 2 months. And it's worst when the two engines are running. And truly, I am about 15 to 20 feet from the exhaust there. This year, they put in a brand new thing that doesn't create as much exhaust. It's a lovely new system that they put in. However, it goes 24/7, and it must because they're pumping water out of the tunnel underneath so they can operate. So that's just kind of the background of what I have been putting up with, because the exhaust is really not healthy or happy. And yes, in the summertime, they don't have to run the pumps but they had to quit last year at the end of February because there was so much water. So they're back again this year. They were supposed to be done June of last year. So this is an ongoing project. I have great respect for the project, the process, and I also respect the four of us who live on the corner of said. I live in the oldest house in the neighborhood. I'm literally, the street is just like right in front of my house and beside. That house was there long before. I think it was built in 1888, 1892, and I've lived there for 42 years. So I'm pretty familiar with the whole place. And now with this street resurfacing that's happening, I'm very concerned of the timing of these two events. I know last year we didn't go until June and the project was done. That I have no idea when they think they can be done this year because it is totally weather dependent. I have a great concern that this resurfacing project is going to impact. If they come and they resurface, they clearly can't resurface until the storm drain process is completely done and the excavation has had time to settle, or else we'll just have another sinkhole there in no time at all. So I really want reassurance, all of our neighbors do, that we're not going to have this cross-section of difficulty. And so anyway, there's that part. The other part is that, yes, I live on a corner. My lot is a lot and a half. The assessment of $1,705.66 to me is a tremendous amount of money. And given I can't even tell you the inconvenience of having that storm drain project is there. I mean, I don't even have a parking space in the front because I've got 14 trucks and cars parked there every day from 6:30 in the morning till 4:30 at night, or 7, depending on when they can quit. I don't mind that. We can deal with that. It's very difficult for me to back out of the whole side street is completely torn up and closed off. I haven't seen my neighbors, unless I go up to the second floor and look out, I haven't seen my neighbor's house for a year and 2 months because this huge thing is blocked off. It's very, 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 very inconvenient. My neighbors can't turn around the corner. There's no access there. So my own personal request is that because of the extraordinary inconvenience that this has been, that certainly for myself and also for my other 3 corner neighbors receive a reduction in the assessment for the resurfacing project. I have no idea how these things are connected with each other, with the committees, but that's a request for me and on behalf of my neighbors as well.
Thank you for that commentary and context. And as you were speaking, there was a flutter of staff notes being made. So we'll make comment on that and have follow-up conversation with you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving down the line, Bob Alberto, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. I'm Bob Alberti. I have lived in this neighborhood right about here for the past 30-some years. I won't waste a lot of your time. What I will say is these streets are actually pretty okay in our neighborhoods. I drive these every day. And I think there are better places to spend money patching and resurfacing than here right now. Certainly, I was going to mention the 28th Street issue. That seems prudent just to delay it until that's done. And since we don't know when that's done, I would almost say put it off for a couple of years. And wait till the streets get worse, because right now you're coming in as a cost to the residents, and it's kind of not very welcome by anybody. Certainly if you're living next to a diesel generator, you don't want to have to pay $1,700 for the privilege. So wait until the streets have some potholes in it and come home as the rescuing heroes, fixing those horrible potholes that everyone's gotten annoyed with. We're not there right now. The streets are pretty good. I would say just do patch and fix up and give it a few years. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wish to come forward? Anyone signed in? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public hearing and maybe ask staff to comment on some of the statements made. I think it's the curb situation as described by Mr. Hodek. And then the lady, of course, wanted to know about the relationship between the storm drain project and the proposed project for resurfacing. And then the final comment, why here, why now? Why don't we wait for the potholes to appear?
Mr. Chair, I'll take these not quite in that order, but regarding the sewer project and that work that's happening, that is a Met Council deep tunnel project. That's not a city's project. However, our project managers are very much aware of what's going on, want to have that done. They will not do the resurfacing until that project is completed. Full disclosure, it's going to get real busy again in that neighborhood this year because there's also going to be a lot of center point energy inside meter moves. There's going to be a lot of holes cut in the street, and Sprint has something too. So it's going to get probably maybe worse before it gets better. But the idea is we're watching all of it, and the resurfacing will be the finishing touch to recap all the streets and make them look real good once we're all done. So the last question about the condition, the pavement condition index, as I mentioned in my presentation for this section of street, is in the high 40s. That's in a condition that we typically like to do these types of projects. It's just the right time to catch it before we hit the slippery slope and the condition drops out very, very fast. If we wait for a few years, it may get to a point where we can't do it with a simple resurfacing. We may have to do it with a very much heavier renovation or a full reconstruction project, which is double and quadruple the cost of the assessments. So we're right in line now to do that. Sometimes, yes, it doesn't appear to the public that it may not be in that bad a shape, but actually that's the best time to resurface, is before it's gone. And we do have enough we do have to do enough patching. We look at that condition on the average for the whole residential project or the whole project. So it's kind of an aggregated thing. So someone might look at their street and think it's not that bad, but there are other streets that might be worse. So that's kind of an average. On the question at 28th on the corner there at Brackett Park, I'm actually going to let Jenny Hager, the Director of Transportation Planning and Program, address that. I'm not aware fully of that project, but I do know that, as I mentioned in my presentation, that we're going to restore what's there at least. So Jenny can talk more about it.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Council members. Jennifer Hager, Director of Transportation Planning and Programming. Thank you for the question. We are aware of the concerns at Brackett Park and that particular intersection. The current recommendation, as you heard with the presentation, was to reinstall the existing pedestrian safety measure at that intersection. As you know, with the resurfacing project, the scope of work is to take off the existing pavement and not move curb lines. So that is the reason for that existing recommendation for the project. However, we've heard the concerns in the presentation here from the constituent, and we will go back and reevaluate our recommendation as a result of that and report back.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, with the youth connection component that was highlighted, I think we should be motivated to find maybe even additional resources. There's different funding for that very purpose that we could potentially also explore as an add-on component to the resurfacing project.
It's sometimes done that way. So yes, we will go back and reevaluate.
That's good to hear, and continue to work with a very engaged community on that point. Thank you. Well, I think we've had the back and forth with the public hearing, which has been closed. We have the item before us. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. There were just a couple things I wanted to add. I did want to let folks know that I've been very engaged in the Brackett Park 28th crossing issue with the bump outs, very involved, trying to articulate a rationale that I might have, particularly about the future of the bike trail, because that's a really important crossing now. So I'm fully engaged, participating in that actively, and intend to keep working on that, which sort of brings up just something I want to alert us all to. A lot of times when a resurfacing comes along, normal folks around there say, oh, here's an opportunity to do something extra. Of course, we say, well, we set aside money to pay for a resurfacing, and we're going to do a resurfacing because that's the plan, and we're doing the citywide thing. So we need to, I think, start thinking about, how do we make sense out of that? I mean, is there really something to, oh, we're tearing up part of the street already, we're going to have trucks out there and people working on it. Maybe there is an efficiency if we were to make an improvement now, or maybe there isn't. So we need to think about that, and if it's going to cost more money, we have to think about how do we have some resources to make this improvement because we think it's going to be beneficial. So that's a bigger discussion, but it's really highlighted each time a resurfacing comes along in my ward because people say, hey, how about this and that? We need this. So let's keep that in mind as we work on that. The other thing that I wanted to mention was right near the sewer work, I believe that house is actually bordered. It's on a very tiny little block, and I don't know if this is your house or your next door, but with streets on three sides of it. It's almost like a little piece of road we don't really need where the sewer work is, because if you're there, you would see, it's kind of like a cut through that got put in just to finish the grid, but really, with the way it works there, it's a little bit strange. I'd like to say let's just take it out and put it in green space, but that really wasn't what I wanted to focus on. I just wanted to ask, is there some assistance we can provide people extending out the assessment a few more years, perhaps, when they get hit with something particularly hard? Maybe if they're a senior or they're on a fixed income, do we have some options so they can ask to have the assessment spread out a little bit further? I don't think we really have ever made any accommodations because you had to deal with 3 years of diesel motors next to your house. We're going to give you some kind of thing. But could somebody speak about maybe options that the property owner could pursue that might help pay for this cost or reduce it potentially?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, there is always the option to anybody who's 65 or older to have their assessment deferred. And they can call a right-of-way department and ask for deferment or apply for a deferment. That's one way to do it. Typically, we do not make accommodations because of other projects or that sort of stuff. But that is one remedy if they meet that criteria, that there is a potential to.
And that would mean that the payment would come when the house is sold later?
That's correct.
Yes. So that was the answer I wanted to my softball question. Not to guess anybody's age, but that's something to think about. Means there's no payments necessary now, but when the house is sold, that would be part of the closing costs to kind of clean that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And with Ms. Beatty here, perhaps staff can just address her, not only for her use, but given that she's in communication with her other neighbors, that might be a nice way to extend that information even deeper in the community. So she's right there. I think there's a commitment to work with her. They'll work with you directly.
And one thing, another part of that question then is there is that option that was mentioned, but there is also interest added into that. So on time payment. So I mean, you can spread it out longer, but you're still paying more. So you're still paying more.
Yeah, they will go through all the different options, including deferment and the other thing that you mentioned. So with that, and I think Councilmember Gordon did raise an interesting thing for us to contemplate in terms of having perhaps some additional opportunity funds that are above and beyond a street resurfacing project, keeping those projects whole with our formulas that are entailed, but also knowing that we have things that are not only on the books, but actually are in the community on a temporary basis waiting for permanency. So I think that's something we could mull over and contemplate, and I think that's something we've done in the past, depending on the context of the situation, or if there's additional funding that I'd referenced earlier, like safe routes to schools, et cetera, that could be coordinated effectively to that end. So with that, we have the item before us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries, and we have completed today's agenda. Thank you.